I was standing on stage at the Thorne Consolidated annual shareholders meeting when the FBI agents walked through the doors. The click of their polished shoes echoed through the auditorium as hundreds of cameras turned toward them. Behind me on the massive screen that usually displayed our stock performance, every dirty secret of the Thorne empire was being exposed in real time. My father's voice, recorded in his private office, spilled out through the speakers, describing how he would frame me for his crimes. The look on Marcus Thorne's face when he turned and saw me standing in the wings, microphone in hand, was worth every sleepless night of the past 6 months. The man who had called me weaker than a dog was about to lose everything. But before I tell you how I brought down a billion-dollar empire, let me ask you something. Have you ever been so desperate for someone's approval that you let them destroy you piece by piece? If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever felt trapped in a toxic situation, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and I read every single comment. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to where it all started, because nobody wakes up one day and decides to wage war against their own father. It's a slow burn, a gradual descent into hell that you don't even recognize until you're already at the bottom. I grew up in the shadow of Thorne Tower, that gleaming monument to corporate power that dominated the Manhattan skyline. From my bedroom window, I could see my father's office on the 47th floor, the lights always burning late into the night. As a little girl, I would press my face against the cold glass and count the illuminated windows, imagining him up there solving impossible problems, making decisions that moved markets and changed lives. I thought he was a hero, a titan who shaped the world with his bare hands. I wanted nothing more than to make him proud, to earn just one genuine smile from Marcus Thorne. I remember the night I brought home my first perfect report card. I was 6 years old, clutching that paper like it was made of gold, practically vibrating with excitement. My father was in his study, as always, reviewing contracts with reading glasses perched on his nose. I knocked on the door 3 times before he acknowledged me. "What is it, Arya? I'm busy." I showed him the report card, all A's lined up in a perfect column. "Look, Daddy," my teacher said, "I'm the best reader in the whole class." He glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds, then returned his attention to his documents. "That's nice. Close the door on your way out." That was the first time, but it wouldn't be the last. The pattern established itself early and never changed. My mother died when I was 7. Ovarian cancer, swift and merciless. She went from healthy to hospitalized to gone in 6 months. I remember her last words to me, whispered in that sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and approaching death. She gripped my hand with fingers that felt like bird bones and said, "Be strong, baby. Your father needs you to be strong." I tried to be strong. I didn't cry at the funeral, even though I wanted to scream. I stood next to my father in my black dress, my hand in his, and I felt him trembling. For a moment, I thought we would grieve together, that this shared loss might finally bring us close. But after we lowered her casket into the ground, after the last mourner left, he pulled his hand away from mine and straightened his tie. "That's enough," he said, his voice flat and distant. "We have a dinner with the Castellan board tomorrow. I need you presentable." After that, he never mentioned her name again. Her photographs disappeared from the house, packed away by staff in the middle of the night. Her closet was emptied. Her favorite chair was reupholstered in a different fabric. It was as if she had never existed, as if loving her and losing her was a weakness he couldn't afford to acknowledge. He threw himself into work with even more intensity, and I learned quickly that the only way to get his attention was to excel. So I excelled. I learned Mandarin, French, Spanish, and German because he mentioned once at dinner that multilingual executives had an advantage in global markets. I studied financial statements until I could spot creative accounting from across a room. I graduated top of my class at Wharton. Gave the commencement speech, had 3 job offers from Fortune 500 companies before I even walked across the stage. I brought him my acceptance letter to the MBA program, hoping for praise. "Wharton is adequate," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Try not to embarrass the family name." And yet every achievement was met with the same response. "Not good enough. Not yet. Keep working." I started working at Thorne Consolidated right after graduation. My father insisted I earn my place, and I believed him when he said it was about integrity, about not showing favoritism. So I started in the lowest level analyst position despite my MBA, despite my last name, despite the fact that I could run circles around half the executives in that building. My first day, my father called me into his office. I thought maybe he wanted to wish me luck, to give me advice, to acknowledge this milestone. Instead, he sat behind that massive desk and stared at me like I was a stranger. "You will not receive special treatment," he said. "You will work twice as hard as everyone else, and you will still be judged more harshly. You will fail repeatedly, and when you do, people will say it's because you're my daughter. Prove them wrong or leave." "I'll prove them wrong," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "We'll see." I worked 18-hour days, arriving before sunrise and leaving long after sunset. I skipped meals, surviving on coffee and adrenaline and the desperate need to prove I belonged there. I canceled plans with friends until I didn't have friends anymore, just colleagues who saw me as the boss's daughter trying too hard. I climbed from analyst to associate to manager to director, each promotion feeling like pulling teeth. Each advancement grudgingly given after I'd exceeded every possible metric. Meanwhile, I watched my father elevate men half my age to positions I was more qualified for. Jason Mendez, 26 years old, with a mediocre track record, made vice president of operations. David Kim, barely 2 years out of business school, given control of the European division. When I finally gathered the courage to ask why I was being passed over again, my father looked at me like I'd asked why water was wet. "You need more seasoning, Arya, more experience. You're not ready for that level of responsibility." I generated $80 million in revenue last quarter. I personally salvaged the Singapore deal when everyone else said it was dead. What more do I need to do? His expression hardened. "When you can ask that question without emotion, maybe you'll be ready. Leadership requires control, something you clearly lack." The real problem, I eventually understood, was that I wasn't a son. Marcus Thorne had built his empire with the vision of passing it to a male heir, someone who could carry the Thorne name forward with strength and ruthlessness. I once overheard him talking to Leo Vance in his office, not realizing I was in the adjacent conference room. "She's capable enough," my father said, "but she's too soft, too emotional. Women don't have the stomach for what real power requires." "Give her time," Leo replied. "She's young. Time won't change biology," Marcus responded. "I need someone who can make the hard calls without flinching, someone who understands that business is war." I stood there on the other side of that wall, listening to my father reduce everything I'd accomplished to a genetic deficiency, and something inside me cracked. But I didn't break. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, proved myself more completely, he would finally see my worth. For 15 years, I poured everything into that company. I spearheaded the expansion into Southeast Asian markets that generated over $2 billion in revenue. I remember the presentation where I laid out the strategy, 20 slides of market analysis and risk assessment and projected returns. My father sat in the back of the conference room, arms crossed, face unreadable. When I finished, he stood up. "Ambitious," he said. "Perhaps too ambitious. But we'll try it your way. Just know that when it fails, the responsibility is entirely yours." It didn't fail. It exceeded every projection. And when the board congratulated us on the successful expansion, my father took the credit in a speech that mentioned my contribution exactly once in passing as a footnote. I restructured the failing manufacturing division and turned it profitable within 18 months. Cutting costs without cutting jobs, renegotiating contracts, implementing efficiency measures that should have been obvious, but apparently required my level of obsessive attention to detail. I personally negotiated the merger with Castellan Industries that made us the third largest conglomerate in our sector, spending 72 hours straight in that conference room, surviving on espresso and stubbornness until their CEO finally agreed to our terms. That merger made my father's net worth jump by $3 billion. At the celebration dinner, he raised his glass in a toast. "To vision," he said. "To the patience to wait for the right opportunity and the ruthlessness to seize it when it comes. To Thorne Consolidated." People applauded. Someone mentioned my name, suggested I say a few words. My father cut them off. "Arya was helpful with some of the preliminary research," he said dismissively. "But these kinds of deals require a very particular skill set. Years of experience. Relationships built over decades. Let's not diminish the complexity of what was achieved here." I smiled and nodded and swallowed my rage along with my wine. Every success was attributed to my father's guidance. Every setback was blamed on my inexperience. When a deal I worked on fell through because a partner violated contract terms, I was reprimanded for not anticipating their deception. When a project I opposed succeeded despite my warnings, I was criticized for being too cautious, too risk-averse, too afraid to think big. The financial cost was staggering too. My father paid me well below market rate for my position, always with the promise that I was building towards something bigger. I made $200,000 a year while peers at other companies were pulling in 7 figures for equivalent roles. When I asked about it, he had an answer ready. "You're investing in your future," he said. "When you eventually take on a larger role, you'll be compensated accordingly. Patience, Arya. Good things come to those who wait." Meanwhile, he borrowed millions from my trust fund money my mother had left me. Her final gift, meant to ensure I'd always have security and independence. The first time he asked, I was 25 years old, sitting in his office after another grueling work week. "I need temporary access to your trust," he said, sliding papers across his desk. "There's an opportunity in commercial real estate, prime properties in Singapore. The returns will be extraordinary, and you'll get your principal back plus 20% within 2 years. The papers were dense with legal language, but the bottom line was clear. He wanted $4 million. I hesitated, pen hovering over the signature line. "This is a lot of money, Dad. Can I see the prospectus?" "The investment details." His jaw tightened. "Are you questioning my judgment? After everything I've taught you about finance, you don't trust me to make sound investment decisions." "No, I just want to understand." "Understanding comes with experience, Arya. This is a limited window opportunity. Either you trust me or you don't." I signed. I signed because saying no felt like admitting I didn't believe in him, didn't respect his expertise, didn't deserve to be considered a real member of the Thorne family. I signed because I was desperate for his approval, and this felt like a test I couldn't afford to fail. The $4 million became $6 million, became $9 million over the next decade. Every time the same pattern. Vague assurances about investments that would benefit us both. No detailed accounting, no returns. When I finally gathered the courage to ask for documentation 3 years ago, his response was immediate and cold. "You don't understand high-level finance the way I do," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "These aren't simple stock purchases, Arya. These are complex instruments, sophisticated vehicles that require years of experience to properly evaluate. I'm doing you a favor by managing this for you. But it's my money. My mother left it to me." His eyes turned to ice. "Your mother is dead. I'm alive. And I've grown your portfolio more than she ever could have. Show some gratitude." So I let it go again and again because challenging him felt like risking the only relationship I had left. Every time I pushed back, he withdrew further. Every time I questioned, he punished me with silence and disapproval. I convinced myself that the money didn't matter, that the relationship was worth more. That someday he would see everything I'd sacrificed and finally tell me I was enough. Then came the Green Future Project. It was my baby, my vision for transforming Thorne, consolidated into a leader in sustainable development. I spent 2 years developing the proposal, building partnerships, securing preliminary funding. It was a multi-billion-dollar initiative that would revolutionize how we did business while actually doing good in the world. The board approved it. The press was excited. This was supposed to be my moment, the project that would finally prove I was worthy of being Marcus Thorne's daughter. The press conference was held in the grand ballroom of the Mandarin Oriental. 300 journalists, investors, and industry leaders packed the room. I stood at the podium in my best suit, my presentation loaded and ready, my talking points memorized. I was 30 seconds into my speech when my father stood up from his seat in the front row. He walked onto the stage, took the microphone from my hand, and smiled at the cameras. "Thank you for that enthusiastic introduction from my daughter," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Arya has always been a dreamer, full of idealistic notions about how the world should work. But we all know that real business requires more than pretty ideas. It requires the kind of ruthless intelligence that separates the truly powerful from the merely hopeful. The room went silent. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. He continued talking about how he would be personally overseeing the Green Future Project, how it needed the steady hand of experience, how youth and ambition were no substitute for wisdom. Then a journalist from the Financial Times raised her hand. "Mr. Thorne, is Arya being groomed as your successor? Will she take over Thorne Consolidated when you retire?" My father looked directly at me. His eyes were ice cold, his smile sharp as broken glass. The pause felt like an eternity. Then he leaned into the microphone and spoke words that would be replayed on every business news channel for the next week. "I would rather hand my empire to a loyal dog than to a weak daughter. At least a dog knows how to obey." The sound that followed was something between gasps and nervous laughter. Someone in the back started clapping slowly, mockingly. I turned and saw Leo Vance, my father's chief operating officer, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Camera flashes exploded around me. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted sideways. I don't remember leaving the stage. I don't remember the elevator ride down or the town car taking me home. I have vague impressions of headlines scrolling across phone screens, of notifications exploding of my name, trending on financial Twitter for all the wrong reasons. What I do remember with perfect clarity is sitting in my apartment at 3 in the morning, still in that suit, mascara streaked down my face, and feeling something inside me finally break. Or maybe it wasn't breaking, maybe it was waking up. For the next 2 weeks, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work, which was probably for the best, since the entire internet had watched my public humiliation. My phone never stopped ringing with calls from former colleagues offering sympathy that felt more like pity. I ignored them all. I ordered takeout, stayed in my pajamas, and tried to figure out how my entire life had become such a spectacular disaster. Then one night I couldn't sleep. My apartment felt suffocating. I needed to move, to do something, anything. Without really planning it, I found myself driving to Thorn Tower. It was past midnight. I still had my executive access card. The building was nearly empty, except for security and the janitorial staff. I took the elevator to the 47th floor to my father's office. I told myself I was looking for closure, for some explanation, for something to make sense of what had happened. His office was dark except for the glow of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I walked to his desk, massive and imposing, made from reclaimed wood that supposedly came from an 18th century ship. Everything about Marcus Thorne was a carefully constructed image of power and legacy. His computer was locked, but his desk drawers weren't. In the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of old contracts, I found a small metal case. Inside was a USB drive labeled simply "Insurance" in my father's handwriting. My hands were shaking as I plugged it into my laptop. What I found destroyed any remaining illusions I had about Marcus Thorne. The drive contained folders meticulously organized by name. Congressman Richard Hayes, blackmail material about his gambling debts and mistress. Board member Patricia Chen, evidence of insider trading that my father had orchestrated and documented. Judge Malcolm Rivers, photographs that would end his career and his marriage. There were dozens of them, a comprehensive catalog of leverage and control. But the folder that made my blood run cold was labeled Exit Strategy. Inside was a document titled Operation Clean Slate, dated from 3 years ago. I started reading, and with every paragraph, my horror grew deeper. It was a contingency plan, a detailed blueprint for what would happen when my father's various illegal activities eventually came to light. The scheme was elegant in its cruelty. He had been systematically creating a paper trail that would implicate someone else as the mastermind behind the money laundering, the bribery, the fraud. And that someone was me. My signature had been forged on transfer documents. My employee ID had been used to access secure systems at suspicious times. My name appeared on correspondence with shell companies I'd never heard of. Email accounts that looked like mine had sent messages coordinating illegal transactions. He had spent years building a complete, convincing false narrative that painted me as either a criminal genius or a corrupt fool. And either way, I would take the fall while he claimed ignorance and victimhood. There were contingency plans for different scenarios. If the SEC came knocking, here's how to point them toward Arya. If a whistleblower emerged, here's how to suggest Arya was behind it. If a journalist started digging, here's the anonymous tip to send them toward Arya's supposed secret accounts. He had thought of everything. I was his insurance policy, his get-out-of-jail-free card, his sacrificial lamb. I was still sitting there trying to process this betrayal when I heard footsteps in the hallway. The office door crashed open. My father stood in the doorway, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot, reeking of whiskey. He saw me with my laptop open, the USB drive visible on his desk, and his face contorted with rage. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed me by the throat, slamming me against the bookshelf behind his desk. Books tumbled down around us. His face was inches from mine, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the veins bulging in his temples. "You stupid girl," he snarled. "You think you're clever. You think you understand what you found. You haven't seen anything. I built you. I created every opportunity you ever had, and I can erase you just as easily. If you breathe one word of this to anyone, you won't just lose your career. You'll disappear. Something in his eyes told me this wasn't a metaphor. Marcus Thorne was capable of anything. I had just discovered the proof. And in that moment, with his hands around my throat, I realized that I had been living in a fantasy. This man was never going to love me. He was never going to see my worth. I was never going to be enough. Because I was never meant to be his daughter. I was always meant to be his escape route. He released me, and I collapsed to the floor gasping. He grabbed the USB drive from his desk and pocketed it. Then he leaned down close to my ear. "You have 24 hours to forget this ever happened. Go back to your pathetic little apartment, keep your mouth shut, and maybe I'll let you keep working in the mailroom. Cross me, and I'll make sure you never work anywhere again. I'll destroy you so completely that no one will even remember your name." He left me there on the floor of his office, surrounded by fallen books. My throat bruised, my entire world shattered. But as I lay there in the dark, something unexpected happened. The fear that had paralyzed me for so long began to transform into something else. Something cold and focused and absolutely certain. I was done being afraid. I was done hoping for love from someone incapable of giving it. My father wanted a war. Fine, he was about to get one. The next morning, I withdrew the last of my savings, about $40,000 from my bank account. I bought 3 burner phones with cash. Then I started making calls. If I was going to survive this, I needed allies. People with skills I didn't have. People who had their own reasons to want Marcus Thorne taken down. My first stop was a co-working space in Brooklyn that catered to freelance tech workers. I'd done my research. Chloe Martinez, who went by the handle Hex online, was one of the best cybersecurity experts in the underground scene. She'd been arrested twice for hacking, but never convicted. She was brilliant, amoral, and expensive. She was exactly what I needed. I found her in a corner booth, 3 laptops open in front of her, wearing headphones and typing furiously. I slid into the seat across from her and pushed an envelope containing $10,000 in cash across the table. She glanced at it without stopping her typing. "I don't do corporate espionage for scorned daughters," she said without looking up. "Too messy, too many variables. Go hire a PI like everyone else." I pulled out my phone and showed her a single screenshot I'd managed to take before my father confiscated the USB drive. It was a page from his money laundering operation showing the routing numbers and shell company structures. Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. She pulled off her headphones and really looked at the screen. Then she looked at me. "This is Thorne Consolidated," she asked quietly. "This is real." I nodded. "He has backups, multiple layers of security. I need someone who can get through it." Chloe sat back and laughed, a sound of genuine delight. "This isn't just money laundering. This is art. Look at this nested structure, these timing delays, the way he's layered the transactions to avoid pattern detection. Your father is a monster, but damn, he's a talented monster. So you'll help me?" She closed her laptops and leaned forward. "I'll help you because taking down something this sophisticated is the kind of challenge I live for. But understand something. If we do this, we do it right. We don't just expose him, we burn it all down so completely that nothing remains. Are you prepared for that?" I met her eyes and didn't hesitate. Burn it all. My second recruit found me. 3 days after I met with Chloe, I came home to find a man sitting on the stairs outside my apartment building. He was in his mid-30s, wearing a cheap suit with the kind of exhaustion in his eyes that spoke of years of carrying heavy burdens. He stood up when he saw me. "Arya Sterling, I'm Julian Croft. I work in corporate security at Thorne Consolidated. Or rather, I've been embedded there for the past 10 years, waiting for someone like you to show up." I should have been scared. Instead, I was curious. "Keep talking." He told me his story as we walked around the block. His father, Daniel Croft, had been a mid-level manager at a company Marcus Thorne acquired in a hostile takeover 15 years ago. Marcus had systematically destroyed the company, stripped its assets, fired all the employees, and left Daniel holding the bag for financial irregularities that Marcus himself had created. Daniel lost everything: his house, his savings, his reputation. 6 months later, he killed himself. Julian was 22 when it happened. I spent the next decade building a new identity, getting credentials in corporate security, and working my way into Thorne Consolidated, Julian explained. "I've been documenting everything. Every bribe, every threat, every illegal deal. I have access to places you never will. Security protocols, surveillance systems, maintenance schedules. I know when your father takes his coffee break and which bathroom he uses. I've been waiting for the right moment, the right leverage. You're it." Why should I trust you? I asked. For all I know, you're working for him. This could be a test. Julian pulled out his phone and showed me photographs. Marcus meeting with known criminals. Leo Vance exchanging briefcases with offshore banking representatives. Board members signing documents in secret. Time-stamped, geotagged, irrefutable. I've been collecting insurance too, he said. But unlike your father, I don't plan to use it to save myself. I plan to use it to bury him. Are you in? I'm in. Over the next 3 months, we built our case. Chloe hacked into Thorn Consolidated servers and created backdoors that would let us access anything we needed while covering our tracks. Julian provided physical intelligence blueprints, schedules, weak points, and security. I used my knowledge of the business to identify which financial records would be most damaging, which board members could be flipped, which regulatory agencies would be most interested in which crimes. But we needed more than just evidence. We needed a narrative, a way to make the public care about financial crimes that seemed abstract and distant. That's where Ben Carter came in. Ben was an investigative journalist for the New York Times who'd been covering business corruption for 15 years. He'd written several pieces about Thorn Consolidated over the years, always careful, always just skating the edge of what he could prove. What he didn't know was that Leo Vance had been feeding him information, carefully curated stories that made Marcus look good and buried anything problematic. When I approached Ben with proof that he'd been manipulated, he was furious. When I showed him the real scope of the corruption, he was stunned. When I offered him exclusive access to the whole story in exchange for helping us control the narrative, he didn't hesitate. You understand that this is going to destroy your father, Ben said. There's no coming back from this. Once I publish, his life is over. Are you prepared for that? I thought about 15 years of thankless work. I thought about the bruises on my throat. I thought about the exit strategy with my name on it. I thought about all the other people Marcus Thorn had destroyed in his climb to power. He destroyed his own life, I said. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. But we still had a problem. The most damaging evidence, the original ledgers showing the foundation of the money laundering scheme, weren't digital. Marcus kept them on a physical server in a secure vault in the sub-basement of Thorn Tower. The vault was air-gapped, not connected to any network. It had biometric locks, pressure sensors, and was monitored by cameras 24/7. There was no way to hack it remotely. We're going to have to do this old school, Chloe said during one of our planning meetings. Someone has to physically go in there and copy those files. Julian shook his head. The security is too tight. Even with my access, I can't get into that vault. Only 3 people have the biometric clearance, and you're looking at one of them. He meant me. My father had granted me vault access years ago, back when he still trusted me, back when I was too desperate for his approval to ever imagine using it against him. He'd never revoked it. Why would he? In his mind, I was either too stupid or too frightened to be a threat. The Thorn Consolidated annual charity gala was coming up in 2 weeks. It was the biggest event of the year, held in the ballroom on the 20th floor of Thorn Tower. Every executive, every board member, every major investor would be there, including Marcus and Leo. More importantly, it was one of the few nights when security was focused on the gala itself rather than the rest of the building. Julian could create a maintenance issue that would require him to access the security system. He could give me a 15-minute window where the vault cameras would loop and the alerts would be disabled. 15 minutes to get from the gala to the vault, copy the files, and get back without being noticed. It was insane. It was impossible. It was our only chance. The night of the gala, I wore a red dress that my mother had worn to a similar event 20 years ago. I'd found it in storage, perfectly preserved. Wearing it felt like armor, like she was with me somehow. I arrived at Thorn Tower at 7. Smiled at the photographers, made small talk with investors I'd known for years. My father saw me from across the room, and his expression hardened, but he didn't approach. Leo Vance did, though, sliding up beside me with a champagne flute and a predatory smile. "Arya, darling, so brave of you to show your face after your little meltdown," he said. "I do hope you're not planning anything foolish tonight. Your father is watching you very carefully." I smiled back, sweet as poison. "I'm just here to support the company, Leo. Same as always." He studied my face for a long moment, then shrugged and walked away. But I could feel his eyes on me for the rest of the evening. Leo was dangerous precisely because he wasn't stupid. He suspected something. I would have to be very, very careful. At 9:30, Julian sent me a text. A single word: go. I excused myself from a conversation with a hedge fund manager and headed toward the restrooms. Instead of turning right, I turned left toward the emergency stairwell. I had 12 floors to descend, and then navigate through the sub-basement to the vault. I kicked off my heels and ran, my heart pounding, my mother's dress rustling around my legs. The sub-basement was a maze of concrete corridors and humming machinery. I'd studied the layout for weeks, but being there in person was disorienting. Left at the boiler room, right at the electrical junction, straight through the loading area. The vault was at the end of a long hallway, a massive steel door that looked like it belonged in a bank. I pressed my palm against the biometric scanner. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the light turned green and the locks disengaged with a heavy clunk. The door swung open and I stepped inside. The vault was smaller than I expected, maybe 12 by 12, lined with metal shelves containing file boxes and hard drives. I found the server Julian had described, pulled out the portable drive Chloe had given me, and started the copy process. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 1%, 2%, 3%. I was at 60% when I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy footsteps, multiple people, voices. I grabbed my phone to text Julian, but there was no signal down here. The footsteps were getting closer, 70%, 80%. The door to the vault was still ajar. I could see shadows moving in the hallway. Someone was coming. Someone had figured it out. 90%, 95%. The door swung fully open, and Leo Vance stepped into the vault. He looked at me, at the portable drive connected to the server at my bare feet, and the expression of guilt I couldn't quite hide. His smile was terrible. "I knew it," he said softly. "I knew you were up to something. Does Marcus know his precious daughter is stealing from him?" "I'm not stealing," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm collecting evidence. There's a difference." Leo laughed and pulled out his phone. "We'll let the police sort out that distinction. I'm sure they'll be very interested in how you broke into a secure vault." The copy completed. 100%. I yanked the drive free and backed toward the corner of the vault. Leo advanced, still holding his phone up like he was going to call someone. But I'd been in this vault before. I knew something he didn't. There was a second door, a maintenance entrance that led to the mechanical room beyond. I'd left it unlocked earlier. I ran for it. Leo lunged after me, grabbing at my dress. The fabric tore, but I pulled free, slamming through the maintenance door and into the darkness beyond. I could hear Leo shouting behind me, could hear him stumbling over equipment he couldn't see. The mechanical room was full of pipes and machinery, and I knew the layout. He didn't. I navigated by memory and by the faint glow of my phone's screen, making my way to the far exit that led to another stairwell. Behind me, Leo crashed into something and cursed loudly. I didn't look back. I just ran. I made it to the stairwell and took the steps 3 at a time. My lungs burning, the portable drive clutched against my chest like a lifeline. I could still hear Leo somewhere behind me shouting into his phone, alerting security. But I had a head start. I burst out onto the 20th floor, back into the gala, and immediately slowed to a walk. My dress was torn at the hem. My hair was wild. But I took a champagne flute from a passing waiter, drained it, and smiled at the nearest cluster of executives like nothing was wrong. 2 minutes later, Leo emerged from the same stairwell, red-faced and furious. He scanned the crowd until he found me. Our eyes met across the room. He started toward me, pushing through the crowd. I turned and walked calmly toward my father, who was holding court with a group of investors near the stage. "Daddy," I said loudly, interrupting his conversation. "Leo seems upset about something. I think there might be a problem." Marcus frowned and looked past me at Leo, who had frozen at the edge of the group, clearly trying to figure out how to explain what had just happened without revealing that he'd let me escape. Before he could speak, alarms started blaring throughout the building. Not fire alarms, security alarms. Julian's voice crackled over the building intercom, professional and urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've detected a security breach in the sub-level systems. This is purely precautionary, but we need to ask everyone to evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. Please proceed to the nearest exit." Chaos erupted. Investors started pushing toward the doors. Security guards appeared, trying to maintain order. In the confusion, I slipped away, retrieved my coat and shoes from the coat check, and walked out into the Manhattan night. By the time anyone thought to look for me, I was in a taxi heading back to Brooklyn, the portable drive safe in my purse, my hands shaking with adrenaline and triumph. We had the evidence. Now we had to make sure everyone saw it. The next 3 months were a careful orchestration of legal strategy, media coordination, and strategic timing. Ben worked with his editors at the Times to build a comprehensive investigation. Chloe analyzed the financial data and created visualizations that would make the money laundering scheme comprehensible to ordinary readers. Julian continued to feed us information from inside Thorn Consolidated about Marcus's movements and mood. I met with a federal prosecutor named Sarah Chen, who specialized in corporate fraud. She was initially skeptical, assuming I was just a disgruntled family member with an axe to grind. But when I showed her the evidence, her skepticism evaporated. She immediately brought in the FBI and the SEC. In exchange for full cooperation and testimony, they offered me immunity from any potential charges related to the forged documents my father had created. But immunity wasn't enough. I wanted justice. More than that, I wanted everyone to see exactly who Marcus Thorn really was. So we made a plan. The Thorn Consolidated annual shareholders meeting was scheduled for March 15th. It would be held in the Grand Auditorium at the headquarters with live streaming to thousands of remote shareholders. It was the biggest, most public stage we could ask for. The FBI agreed to wait until then to make their arrests. Ben agreed to hold his story until the same moment. Chloe prepared a presentation that would hijack every screen in the building, and I prepared my testimony, my statement, my final confrontation with the man who'd raised me to be his scapegoat. The morning of March 15th, I woke up at 5 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. I made coffee, watched the sunrise over Brooklyn, and tried to prepare myself for what was coming. My phone buzzed with messages from Julian and Chloe confirming that everything was ready. Ben sent me a preview of his article scheduled to go live at 10 a.m. The headline read, "$1 billion Betrayal: How Marcus Thorn Built an Empire on Fraud and Framed His Daughter." I put on my best suit, the same one I'd worn to that disastrous press conference 6 months ago. This time felt different. This time I wasn't hoping for approval. I was delivering a reckoning. The auditorium was packed by 9:30. Every seat filled, cameras everywhere, the energy electric with anticipation. This was supposed to be a routine meeting, but rumors had been swirling for weeks that something big was coming. Journalists sensed a story, investors sensed volatility, everyone was on edge. Marcus took the stage at 10 a.m. sharp, looking confident and controlled in his perfectly tailored suit. He launched into his prepared remarks about fiscal responsibility and corporate integrity. He talked about the strength of Thorn Consolidated, about our vision for the future, about the values that had built this company. Every word was a lie, and he delivered each one with absolute conviction. I was sitting in the back of the auditorium, anonymous in the crowd. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Chen. "We're in position." Marcus was talking about trust when the doors at the back of the auditorium opened. FBI agents walked in, a dozen of them, moving with purpose down the center aisle. The audience started murmuring, heads, turning phones, coming out to record. Marcus kept talking, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. He'd seen them now. Sarah Chen reached the stage and held up her badge. "Marcus Thorn, you're under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice." The auditorium erupted. Shareholders were on their feet. Cameras swiveled to capture every angle. Marcus stood frozen at the podium, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and then a cold, calculating calm as he tried to formulate a response. That's when Chloe's hack kicked in. The massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying the Thorn Consolidated logo, suddenly changed. Financial documents appeared blown up to 20 feet tall. Shell company names, routing numbers, transaction amounts in the millions. Then audio began playing through the sound system. Marcus's voice recorded in his office discussing how to hide money from regulators. Leo's voice detailing plans to bribe government officials. I got up from my seat and started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted around me. Marcus saw me coming, and something like recognition flickered in his eyes. He finally understood. All of this was me. "You," he breathed as I climbed the steps to the stage. "You did this." I took the microphone from his hands. The FBI agents were reading him his rights, but I needed everyone to hear what I had to say first. "My name is Arya Sterling," I said, my voice carrying through the auditorium and out to thousands of viewers watching the live stream. "For 15 years, I gave everything to this company and to this man. I sacrificed my health, my relationships, my sense of self-worth, and in return, he planned to destroy me to save himself." The screens changed again, showing the exit strategy document, my name highlighted in yellow, on page after page of fabricated evidence. "Marcus Thorn built this empire on lies," I continued. "He built it by crushing anyone who stood in his way. He built it by betraying the people who trusted him most. And he built it on the assumption that no one would ever hold him accountable. He was wrong." Marcus was struggling against the FBI agents now, his face purple with rage. He was screaming at me, calling me a traitor, a liar, an ungrateful child. The agents handcuffed him and started leading him away. But before they got him to the door, he broke free for just a moment and lunged back toward the stage. "You can destroy my empire," he roared, spit flying from his lips. "But you'll never build anything of your own. You're nothing without me, nothing." I looked at the man who'd raised me, the man who'd spent decades making me feel worthless, and I felt nothing but pity and certainty. "You're right about one thing," I said calmly. "I don't want to build an empire. I want to build something better, and it starts with the ashes of yours." The FBI agents dragged him out as the cameras captured every moment. Leo Vance was arrested trying to flee through a side exit. 3 board members who'd been complicit in the schemes were taken into custody on the spot. The remaining shareholders sat in stunned silence as the screens continued to display the evidence of corruption that had infected the company from top to bottom. Ben's article went live 10 minutes later. Within an hour, it was the top story on every major news site. Thorne Consolidated's stock price went into freefall. Trading was halted at noon when the price had dropped 70%. By end of day, the company was effectively worthless. The empire Marcus had spent 40 years building evaporated in a single afternoon. The trial took 8 months. Marcus was convicted on 23 counts and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Leo got 15 years. The board members who'd been blackmailed were given lighter sentences in exchange for testimony, but their careers were over. The company went into bankruptcy, and its assets were liquidated to compensate victims of the fraud, including the hundreds of employees who'd lost their pensions. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through everything I'd discovered, everything I'd endured. The defense tried to paint me as a vengeful daughter bitter about not inheriting the company, but the evidence spoke for itself. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on every count. The day of the sentencing, I sat in the courtroom and watched Marcus Thorne receive his fate. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished in his prison jumpsuit, his famous silver hair now just gray. When given a chance to make a statement, he looked directly at me. "I gave you everything," he said. "I created opportunities for you that most people only dream of. And this is how you repay me, by destroying everything I built. You're a disgrace to the Thorne name." I stood up. The judge allowed it. I walked to the front of the courtroom and looked at my father for what I knew would be the last time. "You didn't give me anything," I said. "You took from me. You took my childhood, my confidence, my sense of worth. You tried to take my future. The only thing you ever gave me was a choice. I could let you destroy me, or I could choose myself. I chose myself. And that choice gave me something you'll never understand. It gave me freedom." I turned and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. That was 2 years ago. I've never spoken to Marcus Thorne since. Today I'm standing in the headquarters of the Sterling Foundation, the nonprofit I founded with the money I received as a whistleblower reward from the government. We help victims of corporate abuse, financial exploitation, and workplace retaliation. We provide legal support, financial counseling, and emotional resources. We've helped over 3,000 people in the past 18 months. Julian runs our security division, making sure our clients are safe from retaliation. Chloe heads our tech team, teaching people how to protect themselves digitally. Ben serves on our advisory board and continues to write about corporate corruption. The foundation occupies a renovated warehouse in Brooklyn, nothing like the sterile glass tower of Thorne Consolidated. It's warm here, full of light and energy and genuine purpose. Every day I meet people who've been where I was, trapped in situations they think they can't escape, convinced they're powerless against systems designed to crush them. I tell them what I learned. You're not powerless. You're just convinced you are. The moment you realize that your worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion of you, the moment you understand that their approval isn't worth your destruction, that's when everything changes. That's when you take your power back. Some people ask me if I regret what I did, if destroying my father's empire and sending him to prison weighs on my conscience. The answer is no. Not even for a moment. Marcus Thorne made his choices. He chose greed over integrity, power over humanity, his own legacy over his own daughter. He built his empire on the backs of broken people. I just made sure the world knew about it. Other people ask if I've forgiven him. That's a more complicated question. I've let go of the anger. I've released the need for his approval. I've accepted that the father I wanted never existed. But forgiveness implies that what he did was somehow acceptable, that there's a path back to relationship. There isn't. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals are final. And that's okay. Healing doesn't require forgiveness. It requires honoring yourself enough to walk away from what's destroying you. The Sterling Foundation is my legacy, but it's not my identity. I'm building a life that's mine. I have friends who value me for who I am. I'm in therapy working through decades of trauma. I'm learning hobbies that have nothing to do with proving my worth to anyone. I'm dating someone kind who treats me with respect. I'm discovering that rest isn't weakness and that boundaries aren't selfishness. I'm becoming the person I might have been if I'd never spent my life chasing Marcus Thorne's approval. Sometimes late at night, I stand at the window of my apartment and look out at the Manhattan skyline. Thorne Tower is still there now, owned by a different company, rebranded and repurposed. The lights still burn on the 47th floor, but the man who haunted that office is gone, and the girl who lived in his shadow is gone too. In their place is someone stronger, someone scarred but unbroken. Someone who learned the hard way that the only approval that matters is your own. Someone who discovered that destroying the throne doesn't make you homeless, it makes you free. So here's what I want you to understand. If you're trapped in a situation that's destroying you, if you're sacrificing everything for someone who sees you as expendable, if you're convinced that you have no choice, you're wrong. You always have a choice. It might be terrifying. It might cost you everything you think you have. But what you'll gain is something infinitely more valuable. You'll gain yourself. And that's worth any price. Have you ever felt trapped by someone who was supposed to protect you? Have you ever sacrificed everything for approval that never came? What would you do if you had the evidence to change everything, but it meant losing everyone? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own situation differently, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There are more stories about people who found their courage, who took back their power, who proved that it's never too late to choose yourself. I'll see you in the next one.